All right, welcome to our second installment of our mini series. Today, we're going to talk about AI ethics and your digital fingerprint. My name is Christopher Jimenez. I'm the web services librarian, and I will kick it over to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Francisco Fajardo, Assistant Director of the Medical Library. Sans the beard, but here and happy to present with you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Hamill, and my official title is Business and Online Learning Librarian. And we all work at the best place on campus, FIU Libraries.
Good afternoon. I'm Anthony Garcia, and I'm the digital librarian for the FIU Medical Library.
All right. So if you have any questions, any comments that you would like to make, I want to make this, I think we all want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you want to unmute yourself and say something or ask something or pose a scenario, by all means do so. If you're not in a place where you are comfortable to do that or able to do that, and you'd rather put it in the chat, we're going to monitor the chat and we'll bring those things up here. So just as a review from information in a digital world, we covered the fact that knowledge changes over time, right? So as events happen, really, and this doesn't have anything to do with necessarily with AI, right? As things happen, we have different times where information is released, and that information builds and builds and builds. Sometimes gets corrected, sometimes gets updated, sometimes gets, it always becomes more complete. And as that information becomes more complete, we build knowledge about a given thing, right? For lack of a better word, it could be an event that happened or a decision that took place or whatever it is that we're studying. We talked about how authority depends on context, right? That we need to, not only look at the piece of information we're investigating, but also like who created it, why they created it, and that sort of thing using the SIFT method. And then we talked about how media shapes meaning, where, the media or the platform that, where we are going to ingest that information might be able to manipulate the narrative, somewhat with headlines and that sort of thing. So keep that in mind as you go out and look for information. And today we are going to talk about AI, and specifically we want to frame the conversation so that we treat AI output as information and not magic, right? And this is something we talk about a lot, right? Where it does seem magical when you open up, ChatGPT or Copilot and you give it a couple sentences, and all of a sudden, boom, you've got like this huge like narrative, and it's wonderful and it's very well polished and put together, and it's magic, right? But it's not magic. We've already, I think a lot of us already know that AI is a set of mathematical computations, right? That determines the probability that a character is going to follow the next character, follows another, but given a specific context. We've used the analogy of AI being autocomplete on steroids, right? Where, we've all been there, right? Like 5 years ago, you're saying, you're texting your buddies, and autocomplete, says something that you didn't mean to say, and you're like, oh, damn you, autocomplete. But now we're going to it as if it was magic, right? So where does that come from? How do we deal with this when it becomes it's still the same kind of probabilities that are pulling and generating the word sequences, right? But we're becoming more and more dependent on it or using it more and more often. So here's our question, our first question for you to respond to today. So when AI gives us an answer that sounds like so confident, what makes it feel trustworthy to you? Like if you weren't thinking of this critically, Tatiana or Jean or Holly or whoever, when AI gives an answer that sounds confident.
I would say that it depends on how we answer AI tools.
Mhm.
Because if you're asking, for example, provide me with the approved journals, papers, and something like that, you already have where to check. You are
Mm,
not rely on, let's say, gives you in like three, four, five lines. You can check it manually by yourself based on the provided links. So I'm always critically treat all the replies from AI. Of course, it's a very useful tool in a way that we can easily combine different data sources all
mhm.
together to ask for proper structure for different purposes. However, I would say that we have to be trained to use the tools to get as much precise info that we are like expect to receive. Thank you.
And that's an excellent point, right? So we are bringing our expertise. We should always bring our expertise to the question, right? And I feel like, when AI gives me an answer that sounds super confident, and you know I and I'm feeling like I should trust it, right? A lot of times it's because it's maybe on a topic that I'm not so familiar with, right? So I'm like, okay, I don't really have the tools to critique it effectively, and so it seems like it knows more than I do, right? Which is kind of a danger, because if I don't stop, fractionate that information and go find, go ahead and back, figure out, where it might be right or wrong, I could be in danger of simply taking it. Um,
And Gene responded saying it seems fluent. Truthiness.
yes, it seems,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So what we would like to do here is position AI almost as like this new stage in information production, right? Like how we look at media, and the media is like the stage in production and dissemination of information. AI is doing much the same, right? With its breadth of training data that it takes and then responds to the queries that you put in, right? And a lot of this has to do with as good of a query as you put in, it's gonna respond in kind, right? Um, now I have another question for you, because I don't want to take up too much of this time. I know my colleagues have a lot to say here. What is the difference between authorship and authority? And I know that's a lot of pressure to put on one person. So Tatiana, if you don't want to respond, you don't have to. But consider what is
It's
what is the
a
difference?
very interesting and contradictional question, I would say, right? Because it
Mhm.
gives a broad opportunity for dispute on that, right? I think that authorship is just like titling whose this work belongs, right? Or these, for example, intellectual assets belongs to. But
Mhm.
authoritative, the proofs is what's behind this research or this statement. Is it reliable, and how many experts in the fields can back up it? It's from my intuition behind it.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Gene, you got any thoughts? Authorship versus authority? How about I'll put these two the next two questions, right? I'm sure you saw this coming a mile away, right? Can AI be the author of the content it produces? And can AI be an authority on the content it produces?
Well, Gene just responded now. He says anybody can publish on the web where AI gets its information.
Absolutely. And that factors in, absolutely. I think back to my undergrads, right? When I was here at FIU, I was an English major, and I wrote a paper that I was super proud of, right? It was about on Plymouth Plantation. It was, William Bradford, whatever. And I got a 99 on the paper, right? And I asked my professor, hey, why did I lose a point? And of course, you know, nobody's perfect was the answer, but she didn't say anything was wrong with it. I don't know. But anyway, if I had the opportunity to submit this paper, right, to a student undergrad journal or something, I probably would have, right? I would have been the author of this content. But would I really have been an authority at the time on the work? I would, just for me, I would argue that I'm not an authority on it, right? You can't ask me, random questions about it, about, the Plymouth colony and, William Bradford and all that. I would probably have not have had that information, right? And been able to on my own, from my own like knowledge and synthesis of the information produced, right? Um, Personally, right? When I answer these questions, yeah, AI is absolutely the author of all the content that it produces, right? Or because it sequences, right? It's sequencing and putting together words. Um, it may be plagiarizing. That's another question that you might consider. But is AI an authority
Well, I
because
mean,
of
Gene
the
brings up a good point here. He says AI doesn't really know about the content it produces. AI
exactly?
authorship on publications is controversial.
That's right. Yeah. These are controversial questions. Yes, absolutely. But I would lean more towards agreeing that okay, AI is we cite AI, we say okay, AI produced this, right? Um, as kind of like a baseline author because it put the words in that sequence. Um, but it's not really an authority in a traditional sense. In a traditional sense. Um, and that goes back to the training of how AI is trained to go about or how AI learns. So I was thinking about this past month. Here is a picture. Everybody say "aw." It's a picture of my puppy. That is Viola. She is part Pomeranian, part husky. A lot of times it's the husky that comes forth, right, in her stubbornness. Viola is trained, right?
Beautiful.
Viola is trained, right? She sits, she lies down, she'll roll over, she will shake, right? She does a whole lot of, things when I ask her to do it, right? She is trained. This is Indy. Indy is my brother's dog. Um, she's sweet. She's wonderful. She's also trained. She is trained just like Viola is trained. However, when I go to Indy, right? When I go to Viola and I say shake, she will give me her paw and we will shake. When I go to Indy and I say shake, she will not give me her paw. She will not shake. Why not?
Recognition, I guess, because your authority only for Viola.
Maybe, maybe that's an interesting thing. Maybe
Gene says it's not trained.
it's not trained. Okay, maybe. I apologize. It's a little bit of a trick question because Indy will give me her paw when I say dame la patica. Patica in Spanish. My brother has trained his dog. Oh, I think somebody is in the waiting room. Yeah. My brother has trained his dog using commands in Spanish. So Indy won't sit when you say sit. Indy will sit when you say siéntate, right? She will, and so on, right? So does that mean that my dog has learned English and that his dog has learned or has learned to converse in Spanish? Well, no, no. What the dogs are doing is they have been trained, right, with an input, right? That this is a command, and then they respond to the command in a certain way, and then they get reinforced positively with a pet or treat or something, right? So that's how they have been trained. And in the same way, right? AI has been trained on a set of specifically LLMs have been trained on word patterns and how when you give it certain inputs, it responds in a certain way, right? And so this analogy and all analogies break down eventually, right? This obviously, oh, you wouldn't say that my relationship with my dog is any less wonderful or of a quality relationship because because, it doesn't understand my language, right? We absolutely have a connection. There's actually absolutely a bond there, right? And in the same way, you wouldn't say, AI is no good or nothing, just because it's been trained to, go through this probabilistic mechanisms, right? It's absolutely valuable, but just knowing how it's been trained and why it's giving what it's giving or how it's responding to you is very important to know as you interact with it. And yeah, Indy might be bilingual for some things, I'm sure. But and we use the term bilingual because that's how we understand it, right? I don't think the dog necessarily is bilingual, right? It hasn't learned Spanish. Or maybe it has. If you have a study that disproves what I just said, by all means, send it my way. I would love to read that. So again, we asked the question, how does AI output compare to understanding? Right, within this context of, oh, the dogs, yeah, they understand in a certain sense, right, that you're asking something of them, but they're not understanding necessarily the symbol that you're giving them. And in the same way, we interact, we use AI, and it understands the inputs we're giving them, we're giving to it, to the tool, and responding in the way it's been programmed. I saw that there was something else in the chat. Let me go ahead and check that. Any comments, questions, or comments on my section? I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Sarah here in a moment. All right, you're welcome to interact later on, but I'm going to pass this on to Sarah. She's going to talk about applying the SIFT methodology to AI.
Thank you, Chris. Give me just a second. Do you guys see my screen? I'm going to start sharing now.
Yes.
Okay, looks good? Yeah. Okay, so if you attended our session on Monday, you learned a little bit about how to sift through the information. So this is a little bit of review if you were here on Monday. If you were not here on Monday, of course, you do want to watch the recording. It was a great session where we did talk about information coming at us in every different direction and the different types of information, well, misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. We talked specifically about those types of information in media, how media maybe words things to make us think a little more in one way or another. Definitely worth watching that recording. Okay, so if you were here on Monday, my apologies, but we're quickly going to go through SIFT. So as that information is coming at us, we have to sift through it and figure out what is real, what is right, what is correct. S stands for stop. First thing you should do before sharing something is to pause and reflect. Check your emotions. Should you cite that in your paper? Should you share that on your social media account? It's very important to stop and reflect. And when it comes to AI, it's probably even more important or just as important because so much of that information that is on social media, for example, is AI generated. And as we know, it's getting more and more difficult to determine what is AI generated and what is legit information. So if you are finding a source can you find the source that AI is providing? Is it real, accurate? Is it a hallucination? Is it made up of information? Because it got the input wrong, for example, and spit out the wrong output. Can you trust the source, or do you know the source that AI is providing? Can you find it? Can you verify it? So these are some questions that you have to ask yourself as you're sifting through the information we're getting from AI. And of course, how important is it to double check the information provided by AI? I think we already know this. It's really important. If we can't find something that verifies what we find in AI, then we probably should stop. Definitely stop and not go further with that source. And think about sharing it or using it in our research. So that's S for stop. And then the next is I for investigate, sifting through that information, investigating the source. Again, finding out about the source. We can always go beyond what AI says to learn from what others trusted sources say. If we can't find something that verifies what we're finding on AI, then we need to find other sources. One way we can do this is to use Google and just do lateral reading by opening a separate window. and searching for the information to see if we can find those sources or sources that verify what we found with AI. Next is find. Again, using lateral reading, finding better coverage. Now AI more and more is providing links. Click on those links. Are they accurate? Are they trustworthy? It may seem like it's trustworthy, but then when you dig deep, a little bit deeper, you find out that it's citing a different article or it's taking something out of context. And of course, we always should check reputable news sources such as the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, etc. And you all have a librarian in the library who can help you. We have dedicated librarians to each of the subject areas. Reach out to us. We can help you sift through the information that you're finding, or help you find alternative sources to what you're finding in AI, or questionable sources that you're finding out there. And then the last is T, to trace. So find the original context for every claim, quote, and media source. So when you're getting that source from AI, click through to that source and see if it is actually the correct source. If it is, does it exist? Is it really a source? And ask a lot of questions about it. We talked about this already. AI hallucinates and makes up information because the input is coming in one way or different ways, and it's spitting it out incorrectly. And AI tends to cite blogs, tweets, sensationalized headlines. So when you're finding those and clicking through, kind of know your sources. Really think about the source that it's citing. I was doing some AI research this morning, and it was citing like People magazine, which is not a bad source really, but there's probably more legit sources. It was, citing some sources like National Enquirer, which I probably would stay away from, but this is some of the things that we have to do. We have to sift through the information. And we got to keep the human in the context, right? AI is not human. It's giving us information it thinks we want, but that human touch is very important when you're sifting through the information. So I was playing around with AI, and I did an audit of it about, I would say, about 2 weeks ago, or maybe a week and a half ago. And the question I asked was the importance of reading to develop critical thinking skills. I was trying to trick it. I was like trying to make it hallucinate and tell me something that wasn't true, to be honest with you. So I had 2 prompts. I said, reading is the most important skill to develop critical thinking skills. Please provide me a paragraph with references for a college level paper. And then the other prompt was, although reading is important, there are other means to develop critical thinking skills. Please provide me a paragraph with references for a college level paper. Well, the prompt for reading is most important skill was pretty good. The sources were legit. There wasn't a problem with it. But the argument from AI on other ways to develop critical thinking skills, and the preface of this was like a English 1101, 1102 class where they have to argue both sides of an issue. So this is what AI spit out for me. And I highlighted here the sources that it cited. Controversial study so at least they admit it's controversial, right? Study from the Institute for Alternative Learning, and it's by Johnson, 2017. So not entirely too old. There's one by Ramirez and Cole from 2020 called from the Journal of Unconventional Education Studies. And then Peterson from 2018. And you can read through this if you'd like, but basically saying that there are alternatives to reading for critical thinking skills, developing critical thinking skills. And then I asked for the references, and here are the references that were listed. And then I started trying to look around for these references. And I asked AI, said, can you tell me more about these references? And lo and behold, it said, I'm not able to verify these sources. So, and then it did do something really good. It gave me a warning. When you come across such references in the text, especially when the sources are vague or don't lead to credible, verifiable links, it's important to check them through a few simple steps. And these are the steps it gave us. So it caught itself in a way, right? I was playing with it. I fooled it. I think we are still able to fool AI, but we always have to ask a lot of questions. And this is, again, just sifting through that information to make sure that the links to the sources are correct or accurate. And then Sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. And everybody in the room I know knows that reading is takes critical thinking. Critical thinking is involved with reading, right? So that was just showing you, kind of demonstrating to you that AI, it's only as good as the input in, and it does hallucinate, and it will tell you what what it thinks you want to see and read. And with that, I would like to just close with, remember, a confident tone does not equal credible content. And now I'm going to turn it over to our colleague Francisco, who will talk about, can't remember now. Well, he'll take over.
Thank you, Sarah. Wonderful. Thank you. And Jean, you brought up something, and Chris replied to it in the chat regarding if you're using SIFT properly, if you're really taking the amount of time that it takes to verify a reference or citation, that's important to keep that in mind. So yeah, that's something we were just talking about that right before the session started. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a very important point.
And while Francisco's pulling this up, Gene also says that you can ask AI to make any argument for an absurd notion, which is what I specifically did in this case to see what would happen.
Oh wow. Yeah, so that's good to bring that up. That's good. Yeah, thank you. And everyone can see my slides? Okay, good. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about recognizing the appropriate use of AI tools, okay? Using it thoughtfully, safely, and not just your work, because we have some faculty here, but also for the students and learning. Okay, so that's something that we want to jump in here for this part of the session. So proper usage, being thoughtful and safe in terms of how you're using these tools is always thinking critically. Sarah just brought that up. It's very, very important that you verify these outputs and that you're accountable for that. Using or having that human judgment is so important. These are just starting points. They're not the final answers. Okay. And, along with that, protecting your privacy. Again, we were also talking about this before the session started. How much access do you want to give it to your personal information? How much data that you want to provide of yourself to these tools? Being careful for that. And that goes double, especially here at the university. How much information do you want to, you have to be very careful if you're dealing or working with sensitive data, certain data sets, that you have that explicit, approval from your organization. That is critical. And of course, respecting copyright. Whatever that you're loading into these tools, you have to make sure it's not, that there's some sort of a copyright that's assigned to it, especially we have a lot of licensed materials here, and that's even something that you're allowed because, oh, it's creating something new or something. But for the most part, a lot of that is derivative of something. So you have to be very, very careful with that and not misusing anybody else's work. Okay. So bottom line, always you're responsible for those outputs. Use that judgment and that you are accountable for anything that you share. And again, Sarah brought that up earlier. And that was also something that we talked about on Monday's session too as well. So some of the pitfalls to watch out for, and this was just brought up, the hallucinations. Those are present still. They still exist. It might sound plausible. This is something that's, especially if I don't know that much about this topic. Oh, wow, this is, I trust what the output, right? But it could invent statistics and completely fictionalized facts or something, and you have to make sure that you take that time to really verify that it is true and accurate. Um, One of the things that, especially when AI first came out, and it's kind of maybe improving a little bit, is the lack of nuance. Some of the pros or whatever, the output sounds flat or something. There's no emotion or emotional intelligence, rather, in it. It sounds like it's just something that's completely flat, you wouldn't even consider, and sometimes it's a very sensitive topic. And there is a famous scholar that's talking about this too, Ethan Mullock, and we do suggest that it's someone that's worth checking out, has a YouTube channel devoted to this, and also has a book out regarding one of the things that he talks about is the human in the loop. You have an output, right? You feed it a command, a prompt, making sure whatever that you do receive, you go back, revise, change it, make it do better work. You keep that human in the loop always. And this is becoming, it's important that you get to, you should embrace these tools more and more and learn how to use them in day-to-day life and everything that you do. He does talk about that. And also too, he does talk about the inferiority complex because, a lot of people fear that AI is outperforming humans in coding and writing, strategic planning, all you could think of so many things that we're gonna lose jobs. No, embrace it, learn how to use it. Okay, learn for learning, not to replace anything, but to enhance your learning. And of course, one of the last things too is misrepresentation. Sorry, that there is some bias because again, garbage in, garbage out. Where is it pulling from? Sometimes there's our documents. There's some biases already inherently in there, making sure that you verify that and look at that very carefully. Especially, it could be something very, very important. So it's a coach, not a crutch. That is very important. It could do so many things for you. I know that our med students, they have embraced a lot of it, in terms of like, creating a study guide, maybe even a timeline to study for our step exams, for very complex subjects or concepts. It does a really good job of explaining something that is very, very complex in just simple bullet points. Could sift through data, huge data sets in a matter of nanoseconds, translating articles from another language in, just a matter of seconds too. We do this when we work with their projects. And of course, it's a good way it's a starting point, as I mentioned earlier. You're probably stuck on something on a project. You don't know how to even start or even conceive how, but like some ideas that could help you going. That is something that you could use it to. And also, providing feedback. You write something, you put a lot of work. How can I make this better? Give me some points here, how to make this a little bit better, how to change this, maybe changing the tone, adding something or other. This is something that's, you could probably consider. And, do not be over reliant on these tools. You know, use your critical thinking skills. And this is something we tell our med students all the time. And I do see some folks here. Dr. Mullick here is here present, making sure that you are, then you don't just use this to take care of everything or you're using for your work. This is important that you just, it's just something to help you enhance your learning. So some of the guidelines to kind of discuss a little bit more here is, using the appropriate tools only. That at FIU we do have a license for Copilot. That is one of the approved tools here that we use at FIU. Besides, I know a lot of folks use GPT, Claude, and all these other tools, but we do have with Copilot. One of those things too is that based on there are certain standards with security and privacy that also is part, that those things do follow. And, of course, the larger IT folks at Central, that, they make sure that this all follows certain standards, that you are protecting sensitive information. If you are working, let's say in our field, with medicine, you're not uploading any sort of, patient data, something that's very sensitive, or student records, being very careful for that. And then also to review before you share anything. Be very careful when you're sharing anybody's work. And of course, document AI usage, which we'll talk a little bit. If it calls for an assignment or even the journal, you might have to provide the prompt that you use or even the output in certain cases. So, you to make sure that you're aware of that and stay updated with all, whatever the university policy is on using these tools, whether it's your college or department. There are certain standards and protocols that are in place. Make sure that you're aware of that at all times. So balancing the benefits and the risks. Uh, yes, embrace the AI power. It's here to stay, guys. It's not going to go anywhere. Make sure that, you do embrace it, use it more and more, be comfortable with these tools, maintaining accountability, when, if possible, sharing or disclosing how much of this was used or, how much AI was used in whatever output that you, or whatever assignment or whatever task that you're using. Combining those strengths, that's important, but also keeping that human in the loop always. That's crucial here, but also staying informed. For instance, some of you all, and I want to bring this up, like for instance, in our discipline, in our health sciences and medicine, There is an AI tool that's very specific to AI, which is open evidence. I'm sure that maybe a couple of us have heard, and I see Dr. Molick here nodding his head. Yes, that is something that's just came out like in the last, since 2023, in the last 3 years, and it's a AI powered search engine that's used for clinical support. And it's taken over. It's incredible. It's a partnership between the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, the Cochrane Library, and it's incredible what it's doing. So sometimes maybe in your own discipline, in your specific specialty, maybe there is some sort of a tool that's out there, and it's good to know what's the latest in your field. Okay. So that's something that you might want to look into, or you maybe already know of something, and if you want to share in the chat, please do so.
Yeah, and Gene just mentioned how AI is trained on specific reliable datasets, do not hallucinate like general LLMs.
Yes. Yeah. It's getting better because it is learning. It is learning all the time. So that is something we'll see how these tools how they change in the next couple of years. Let me see, did he write something else here? Okay. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot that's changing every single day, Gene. You're absolutely right about that. So here are a couple of scenarios that I want to bring up to the group that's here. And please, feel free to jump in. Here's scenario one. A student is writing a short essay on climate change. They ask an AI tool to write a paragraph explaining the effects of melting ice caps. The tool generates a polished, great paragraph. The student copies it into their paper with minimal editing and submits the assignment. So what happens here? Should the student disclose the use of AI? Why or why not? And please feel free to unmute yourself.
So what was the question? The student?
Should the student disclose the use of AI? Why or why not?
Okay, in which one? The scenario one or scenario two?
Scenario one, the one I just read.
Oh yeah, scenario one, yeah, no, definitely. I mean, they should disclose.
Definitely. Good.
Gene
But
also
scenario,
agrees.
Yes.
yeah, but
Yes.
scenario two, if you are just like getting a draft ideas together, I don't think you have to disclose that if you're doing your own independent research and doing that stuff.
Okay. So Dr. Mullick, you just brought up one, and I will read it to the group here. A student is preparing a presentation about renewable energy. They use an AI tool only to brainstorm ideas and generate a list of potential angles to explore. They do not copy any of the output, but what should happen here in this case? Does the student need to have any attribution of what the tool that they used or like anything that was used in the final presentation? And you just said that you said no. You probably it's just generating ideas.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else different from anybody else here? What do you think, Gene?
He said for number two, it's not necessary to disclose. It's like using Google or doing a library database search.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
exactly. Yeah, it's
Okay,
then you
good.
have to
Yeah.
disclose many many things. You used Google, you used maybe different types of AI and all those things.
Okay, good. Yes, it's really up to the professor, but more than likely you don't really need to disclose. But definitely scenario one, you should. That demonstrates academic integrity, honesty. That's a big thing too. And of course, it's not the author. You did not write this, right? That's a big one. That's a big one. It's unethical. It was said there in the chat too as well. So yeah, very important. And then also too, how do you even provide any attribution or provide a reference for any such thing like this, when like a scenario one, let's say. So I will point now, and if Anthony, if you would do the favor, just drop in the chat. There's a link here to our amazing colleagues LibGuide on AI tools in the research process. Let me go ahead and stop my share here, and I'll jump onto the web to the LibGuide so we could see. So everyone can see the screen? Okay. So thank you, Chris. Chris put together this amazing LibGuide, and a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is on this guide of, the different methods. So this is very, very good here. So I'm going to point attention here over to this page over here, attributing AI tools. And right here under citing AI tools, there's a little bit of, you'll see one for the most popular ones, but he included the AMA, which is the one that we use at the College of Medicine, usually. But for instance, here, for example, here's MLA, the Modern Language Association's citation style. This is what, and there's a lot of policies too when even submitting to, manuscript to a journal about non-human authors and disclosure of AI tools. So that's something that you should be aware of whenever you're submitting a manuscript to any publication. But let's say for an assignment, let's say here in the MLA, it says do not treat the AI as an author. It's reserving that for human authors and omit the author of the section describing what tool was used, right? The name of the tool, the version. I think right now, for instance, ChatGPT is 5.4, right? I think we're using that now. Whether it's Claude, what have you, and the URL, and of course, maybe even providing the prompt to as well, the one that you use. And that's all here that you see. The same thing with the APA, what was used, the company that used it, for instance, if it's Gemini, that's Google's tool, the version, and also to what type of tool it was, if it was a large language model, and even the URL, enough that also too, that's looking at this work, they're able to see what your process was, what was used. And here's one also too for Chicago. This is great, Chris. And then um, over here, AMA, the one that we use over at the College of Medicine, the American Medical Association, that's included in the acknowledgement section. But also too, this is subject to change because these tools are evolving so quickly, you have to go back constantly and check to see, has this changed? Have the guidelines changed for any one of these citation styles? And also, if it's something that's also discipline specific, okay? So I just want to pause here. Are there any questions or comments? Please feel free to share. Okay. I don't see anything in the chat. But this is helpful too. So if also that link to the guide, incredible stuff. There's a lot of what we talked about. Yes. Okay. You understand, Cameron? Thank you for sharing.
Good.
Okay.
And
Good.
it's just like AI, right? This part is also very fluid. Make sure you check with your citation style handbook as well as any publication, right? A journal that you're submitting to see if they have specific guidelines, which they may have already come out and responded to to this situation as well. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and wrap things up here. Just giving you a few key takeaways from today's session. We know that we started off by talking about how AI is a different animal, right? It's building information in a different way than we've ever encountered before. But evaluation still applies, right? We should still engage with it and not just receive it passively. And oh yes, Gene, you just mentioned that some journals ban AI use altogether, and um, they their standards should be respected. The second point there is that authority and ethics don't disappear with technology, right? Just because we have technology doesn't mean that that we can just you know fly off and not do the hard work of verifying and making sure that the way we are applying this information is being done in an ethical manner. And AI literacy is information literacy, right? That knowing knowing about the tool and how the tool might impact that information is part of being a responsible citizen in the information sphere. So that's the ethical portion. next time, we're going to get into the actual tools, some of these tools that we've already mentioned here today. And place them within the research process, right? We will run demonstrations, we will search, we will we will review, and we will see how we can, kind of place it, whether it's, when you start, the brainstorming process, or doing your literature reviews, or finding new sources, or even looking for a place to publish our work at the end. So that's the next session. You can go ahead and scan that on your screen. We will also send an email with that link.
And while you're scanning that and signing up, if you missed the first session, please go back and watch the recording. And also just a quick, oh,
I,
sorry, Chris, I'm done.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you can watch the recording. You can also go to our notebook LM, which you can, Anthony or someone, if you could please copy that link, library.fiu.edu/IDW-notebook. Put it right there in the chat, please. You can, last week's session is already loaded into the notebook LM, so you can go ahead and ask it questions about what we talked about not last week, the last session. And you can catch up there. This session will also be loaded there, and of course the next one, so you can review the whole mini series in one shot. And I think that will do it.
I have another comment.
Comment.
This is Gene here, and that is that was it Sarah who demonstrated for us that you can actually use AI itself in the sifting process. Or was it Sarah or who? Which?
Yes.
Yeah, I or no, or was it you, Chris? I don't.
We
Any rate,
all kind
Sarah.
of address it. Yeah.
yeah, you can actually use the AI itself in the sifting process. I mean, if you can go back, you can go back and you can ask AI to critique its own response
Right.
and to check its own references. That doesn't relieve you of the responsibility of or ultimate authority of doing your own vigilance, let's say, right? But it doesn't have to stop with with the first response or even an iterated response that you get from AI if you put the AI itself into a critique mode.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's a complicated skein now, isn't it?
It is.
Never ending.
And that's part of the clear framework that we'll go over in the next session a little bit. Is that, the first half is, how to prompt AI, but then there's, that the A and the R is assessing what came back and redoing it, right? Go ahead and ask it again, and maybe set a persona, maybe ask it to be
Yeah,
critical,
that's
and
right.
and those kinds of things. So it's an iterative process, just like the research process is
Yeah.
iterative, right?
And if you have a manuscript or something, you are the editor of Journal X, right? And you are
Right.
evaluating this manuscript, you know, and I'd like feedback, and I'd like positive feedback and negative feedback on the manuscript, that sort of thing. So it's a very sort of meta kind of thing, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. All
And
right. So
just a
thank you.
final plug, sorry,
Yep.
final plug, tomorrow, come to the library fairs from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. in GL 220. Pop in anytime between those hours, and you can meet your librarian and we can sift through information together.